Next, we have Frank Gaffney. I know Frank has to make a plane. He'll be here for a limited period of time, so we'll be quick and we'll limit our questions. Frank, thank you. I think I've heard about you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Frank.
Good to go?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to complement a program that I think can be very important, not just to the state of New York, but I hope to the country, to the extent that it actually encompasses all of the threats that we are confronting to our homeland, both here in New York, New York City, New York State, as well as across America. I wanted to present to you as an example of research that we have been doing on this subject, a book entitled Sharia, the Threat to America. You've heard several of the previous witnesses talk about it. The threat, or the absence of the threat posed by what is best described, I believe, as a politico-military legal program whose express purpose is to have it imposed worldwide, subject to a theocratic ruler, usually called a caliph. That is, of course, a program that is completely at odds with our Constitution, our form of government, our way of life, our freedoms. And I think to the extent that we have, to this point, as a nation, failed to both understand that reality, let alone respond to it properly, has contributed to what, I'm sorry to say, nearly 10 years after 9/11, is a nation that is still tremendously insecure. Despite the enormous investments we've made, both in terms of dollars and lives, the efforts that committees like this across the country have made, and the hard work of an awful lot of Americans, the absence of clarity about the nature of the threat doctrine that animates our enemies, yes, most obviously those that engage in violence to try to achieve this stated objective of imposing Sharia worldwide. But also, and in some ways even more worrying, is the effort being made by the Muslim Brotherhood and organizations like it that regard other ways of accomplishing that end state as more practicable, at least for the moment. We know from documents that the federal government introduced into evidence in the Holy Land Foundation trial in 2008, the largest terrorism financing trial in American history, introduced, by the way, uncontested by the defense. These documents included a strategic plan prepared by the Muslim Brotherhood in 1991 that came into the possession of the federal government in 2004. This so-called explanatory memorandum was very illuminating in at least two respects. One, it described the mission of the Muslim Brotherhood in America as a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within, sabotaging its miserable house by their hands, meaning ours, and the hands of the believers so that God's religion is made victorious over all other religions. That's a pretty direct and clear statement of hostility to our country, our government, our way of life. Helpfully, this strategic plan, the explanatory memorandum, also had, and by the way, the entire explanatory memorandum is reproduced in the second appendix to this book. I commend it to you. Attached to that explanatory memorandum was a list of 29 organizations under the heading, a list of our organizations and organizations of our friends. Imagine what could be done if they all marched according to a single plan. That list, dated, again, 1991, represents virtually every prominent Muslim American organization in the country as of that time. The Council on American Islamic Relations was not on that list, simply because it hadn't come into existence until 1993 and 1994. We know, however, that it was the direct offshoot of the Islamic Association of Palestine, which was on that list, because the FBI had the organizational meeting of the Council on American Islamic Relations under surveillance. All of this was introduced into evidence in the Holy Land Foundation trial. My point here, Mr. Chairman, is to say that we need to be clear that in addition to the threats of violent extremism, which I believe are best understood and explained, in terms of the preeminent dangers we face, I'm not talking about the odd individual who does something awful around the country who isn't doing it in the name of Sharia. I'm talking about those who are. That in addition to that, we have organizations in this country that are promoting a kind of stealth jihad, or what the Brotherhood itself has called civilization jihad. And if I could just give you a couple of examples very quickly of how this works. Under our noses, with us either looking the other way or simply failing to appreciate the significance of these things, particularly in the aggregate and over time. We have influence operations that are being run by organizations associated with the Muslim Brotherhood, whose purpose is to assure you that they are working with us, they are cooperating with law enforcement, they are part of the team in protecting this country against the threat of these people who are trying to hijack their faith. One of the leading indicators that that is what is known in the tradition of Sharia as taqiyya is they deny that there is any such thing as Sharia. That there is, in fact, this very
message received.
Believe me, it is copiously documented in this book. Very well-established code, not just legal code, but political, military, intelligence code that guides the overthrow of all governments that are in the way. Those working by stealth inside Western societies, and you see this most dramatically in Europe at the moment. Did you know, for example, that there are now 751 areas that are called by the French zones urbaines sensibles? That's a fancy French term for no-go zones. Those are places where the authorities of France dare not enter for fear of their lives. Now, people say that can't possibly happen here. I'm telling you right now, including in this state, there are communities like Islamburg that are no-go zones as well. It has been documented the FBI and local law enforcement dare not enter those facilities where weapons training, explosives, and the like are being used by Jamaat al-Fukra, the group that runs these camps across the United States and Canada, some 35 of them, for the purpose of preparing, according to their leader, a sheikh by the name of Jelani out of Pakistan, for the day of jihad. A terrorist infrastructure, and as you probably know, Islamburg is near some of the important watersheds, the drinking water of this community in upstate New York. We have influence operations being run that go beyond simply trying to disinform. Well, frankly, committees like this. We have them inside organizations like the FBI. Did you know that Kifah Mustafa, one of the preeminent Hamas figures in Chicago, an unindicted co-conspirator in that Holy Land Foundation trial that I mentioned a moment ago, was brought by the FBI as part of a Citizens Academy into 3 of the most sensitive facilities in the United States government. The FBI headquarters, the FBI Training Academy at Quantico, and the National Counterterrorism Center. It's clear from people who were on this trip with him that he was using it as an intelligence collection operation, trying to figure out how the FBI counters people like him. That kind of activity is going on all the time. The Ground Zero Mosque has been mentioned here. I believe this is part and parcel of the kind of effort to insinuate Sharia in this country. The Imam who brought us this proposition, Faisal Abdul Rauf, has made clear he seeks to bring Sharia to the United States. The Ground Zero Mosque fits the profile of triumphalist mosques built on sacred ground of defeated people elsewhere around the world. I believe it should not be allowed to happen here. Sharia-compliant finance, this community especially, you should be aware, this is another vehicle for legitimating Sharia and enabling those who are Sharia proponents and, in fact, leaders like Yusuf al-Qaradawi to exercise influence over the capital and credit flows of Western economies, including ours.
Frank, we're running a little over time, and Senator Zeldin has a question.
Sir.
Well, thanks for being here. I guess I have to start off by saying I happen to be very grateful that this country has Muslim Americans like Linda that testified before you. I think that a lot of what you said.
Message received.
Is you've spent a lot of time studying the issue. I would have to say parts of what you said I believe might be your personal opinion, and others may genuinely be fact. And the goal is to be able to sort through as much of what is your personal perspective and what is fact would be my personal goal. Leaving this particular hearing, I happen to be happy that you're here as well. I'm happy that Linda was here before you, and I'm happy that Noni was here before Linda. And I'm actually very grateful that this hearing took place, and that Chairman Ball have all of you here for this hour. I'm not worried as a New Yorker of the threat from peaceful Muslim Americans like Linda and all the people in her community. I'm happy that they are part of America, and they are fellow Americans. They serve with Senator Adams in the police force. They served with me in the military. They served with Senator Golden, and I'm happy that they're here. There is a very real threat in this country that I don't want to ignore today or ever. And it's the basis of why I'm grateful that you are here and Noni was here as well. Because there is a small piece, you have this great, big, peaceful Muslim American community that they love contributing to our society. This is the place for dreams and opportunity and success, for a better way of life. And for all of them, I'm happy that they're here. There is an element within our country. They were here that in the past and in the future, whether they happen to come from one particular religion today, and it's different 20 years from now, or another country, it might be different 20 years from now, it exists. And I think it's so important for our work to continue after here, and for the work down in Washington to continue, and for our intelligence agencies to continue to talk, because the threat is real. And while I appreciate and love the fact that we have such a healthy, peaceful Muslim American community in this state and in this country, and I love every single one of them, we have to take the threat seriously, because I don't want to ever have another terrorist attack take place on our soil. And I am committing myself, and I'm sure every single person, Republican or Democrat, regardless of where you're from, what your religion is, I happen to be Jewish, whatever your religion is, whatever part of the state you're from, we're all committed to making sure that 9/11 never happens, and that's why I think Senator Ball put this hearing together and gratefully did it. Senator Adams?
With my colleague, I don't want a threat or an attack on American soil, not at 9/11 or in Oklahoma City. And those were not Muslims that attacked us in Oklahoma City. And so my question to you, with this extensive research about a threat, are we looking at, the goal is to subdue all threats and not to focus on any particular groups, but to end threats? Have you looked at any of the threats that are taking place across our country with those organizations and groups that are not of the Muslim faith? Are you finding that those threats also exist, or do you believe those threats dissipated with the arrest of the individuals that were involved in Oklahoma City, or do we still have that threat that's prevalent?
You want to respond to both?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your respective service to our country, both in your present capacity and in your previous ones. Senator Zeldin, I'm not going to impugn anybody specifically, but I will tell you that in the United States government, for years, a fellow by the name of Anwar al-Awlaki was considered to be a member of the peaceful Muslim community of the United States. In the Dar al-Hijra Mosque, where he operated, among other people who spent time there, were of course members of the people who brought down the buildings not so far from here. It wasn't really, I think, until he fled the country and started running al-Qaeda terrorist operations against this country from Yemen, which prompted his placement on, as you know, the killer capture list, that a lot of people started saying, you know, not only what's he doing there, but what was he doing here? I commend you for your commitment to go to school on this. I mean, you've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about it already, but if you want to know what is fact and what is opinion, start with this. This is a document that was done by 19 top-flight national security professionals to evaluate exactly what the doctrine is and what its genesis is. And, you know, you can hear all day long from the Lindas of this world what they believe or what they think or what they'd like you to believe. And I simply want to impress upon you that whatever she thinks or says, or organizations like CARE, which, as I've said, is associated with Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood.
I'm going to ask, just like I did before, that we keep the ad hominem intact.
This is not ad hominem, sir. This is a measure of fact.
You know what? Today I'm Chairman Frank.
You certainly are.
And Frank, I'm telling you, let's not get into a spitball contest on Homeland Security.
I'm not going to go there.
Stick to the facts.
I am sticking to the facts. And with respect to your question, sir, I believe the facts make clear that there are, of course, people of various stripes and persuasions across this country who either for psychotic reasons or for perhaps political or ideological reasons engage in activities that are a threat. My organization tries to be aware of all of them to the extent we can and to recommend policies for dealing with them to the extent we can. I have to say, with the greatest of respect, that if you were to do what I think we have to do, and most especially people like you have to do, even before the present budget crisis descended upon us, and that is to engage in triage, you've got to start with the most serious threats, the most obvious threats, the most disciplined, organized, and frankly, destructive of threats. And I fear that we have neglected for too long one of them that is a subset of the larger problem that we've been contending with in a fashion, I think hobbled, frankly, by the what we consider to be politically correct blinders, namely the violent adherents to Sharia, who are using terror to try to bring their program to the supremacy that they think Allah has told them it deserves. I'm worried about this other piece, which I think, as we do triage, you have to give a higher priority than the whack job who shoots a congresswoman in Arizona, for example. I mean, is that a threat? Yes. Is it a terrible tragedy? Yes. Was it anything remotely approaching what an organization that says its purpose is the violent overthrow of the United States government and has been operating largely not only under the radar horizon, but our government itself has used organizations like these for outreach. Just give you one example. A man who is currently serving 23 years in federal prison for terrorism-related charges, including al-Qaeda financing, was responsible under the Clinton administration for selecting, training, and credentialing chaplains for the U.S. military and the U.S. prison system. Now that is just madness. To this day, to the best of my knowledge, we've not gone back and tried to figure out, were those guys in fact part of his program? We ought to be doing that kind of due diligence, I respectfully suggest, among other things that you here in the state of New York need to be attending to with respect to your own homeland security. I had a couple of specific recommendations, if I could make those before I get to...
No, we're not going to give you the hook. Senator Golden has a couple of questions, and I just want to say, Chairman, I too am grateful for your testimony, and the councilman who is here brought it up, the fact that whether this committee was aware that a community in Flushing, Queens had a terror cell inside the leadership of that mosque. And I think that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed delicately, and it really shouldn't be us versus them. It should be reflective And that's why we have to avoid some of the attacks back and forth and really focus on our collective security. Senator Gold.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gaffney, thank you for being here today. And I really want to listen to the next part of your discussion here, and I hope it'll be brief.
Yes, sir.
We'd like to know what the recommendations are short of deportation and internment. I think there is a place that we can go here. And we have to stay focused on why we're here. We're here because of the terrorists that still exist in this great nation, and the threat assessment to this great nation, but more so the threat assessment to this great city and state. So if that's where we're heading, that's what I'd like to hear about, really. That's the only focus I want to hear about, is the threat assessment of the most dangerous, the individual that's going to attack us, that's going to hurt us, not the Muslim world. Thank you.
Simple, Senator Zeldin and Griffin have follow-up. Maybe they can ask a follow-up, maybe you can respond to it.
Sure. Before you make a recommendation, I just want to go to a point you made, that we're all here for the same reasons, hopefully, because we all believe in this country and want to make sure that we're being vigilant and prepared to protect this community, state, and country. You made a point that you said, you talked about a do-not-go zone, and you made an insinuation that you know where these exist. Now, are you indicating that our law enforcement officials, federal, state, are aware of this, and there's a perceived threat, potential there, and danger, and nothing is being done about it? Is that what you're saying?
I'll respond to that, yes, sir.
Uh,
Do you want me to do that out of turn, or take them all?
Senator Zeldin. Hopefully you remember their questions, and mine is really more so as a statement. This is probably the last time that I'll be able to address while you're here. I don't know Linda. Okay, she came here for the first time today. I got a chance to hear her speak. I can sense her passion, and I speak of those peaceful Muslim Americans that I would assume are like Linda. You gave an example, and as far as the organization and theories and all this stuff, connections to different groups, that's all extremely alarming. But I'm not. You said something about the example with Alawat, and he was presumed to be a peaceful Muslim American until that turned the other way. And I can only speak for myself in saying that I believe it's really important for our country to assume that a Muslim American is peaceful when you first meet them and when you first see them. And it's only upon intelligence that they are a threat that you change that perception. And I would just hope that that's where our state and country can go, is realizing just how many Muslim Americans are here that are peaceful and they want to contribute. The Alawaki example is, I understand it's a great example to support your argument, but I still believe that we have to deal with the stereotypes that are out there to make sure that we actually get ready to the threat.
Okay. Frank, good? Okay, sir. Important points all. I must tell you, I don't want to see what happens to this country if there's another terrible 9/11, possibly on an order of magnitude more scale than what you saw right here. My view of this is, you asked the question about, are we going to go to internment camps? If something really horrible like that happens, we might. So it's all the more important that we do the sorts of things that I think might make a difference. I'll speak to the several other questions as I try to lay those out. I think the defining difference between Muslims who are genuinely peaceable, authentically American, tolerant, law-abiding, and respectful of our Constitution, whose presence in this country I feel second to none in welcoming. I have friends in that community. Those folks are the people we need to empower, and we need to ensure are not suppressed or kept from testifying. The way you define the difference between them and the people who are absolutely
Message received.
And Alawaki was demonstrably that throughout his time at Dar al-Hijra, and of course in Yemen, is their adherence to Sharia. It is a knowable thing. It is a program that absolutely is unconstitutional and anti-constitutional. If they line up with it, you got a problem. If they don't, and they're willing to work with us against our common foes, who are people who are trying to impose that program on them as much as on us. That's a tip-off. Is the FBI not responding to evidence that there are problems in groups and zones, if you will, or communities like that in Islamburg? I believe there is that evidence, and I would encourage you to look into it. We'd be happy to provide what we have in that department. I know this to be true of both the federal levels and, in some cases, the state levels, where states have simply not been prepared to risk what could be, well, bad press, among other things, by going after and trying to clean up what are indeed, I believe, terrorist training facilities. The Islamburg. Islamburg is a Jamaat al-Fukra compound where you have people engaged in weapons training, explosive training, and I believe being guided by a sheikh by the name of Jelani, as I said, who is, as far as I can tell, that is the case.
You're making a pretty serious accusation there.
I'm
some proof that you
have evidence that this is the case. It's documented in film.
Chairman, so we can
Be
maybe
delighted.
Let's give it to the press, so let's see if the press gets
I would welcome all parties getting to the bottom of this, because I think you want to know what kind of homeland security problems you have in New York State. I think that's an example of it. Let me just very quickly say, if we can stop legitimating those institutions and activities that promote Sharia in our country, whether it's in the financial sector, right around the corner from here, whether it's in our court system, whether it's in academia, whether it's in the media, whether it's in the outreach organizations that we use, I think that would make a profound difference. I think, if I may just very succinctly say what I believe is the essence of the point. Sharia, as it has been trademarked, branded, and practiced for over a millennium in Islam, is a political and seditious activity. It is not a protected religious practice. If you are clear about that point, a lot of other things start falling into place, including what you can do about it, which I think is roll it up, not allow it to continue to metastasize. And again, if you think this can't happen here, look at what's going on in Europe, and you will see that that is the same trajectory Sharia would have for all of us. The stealth jihad has simply gotten further along there than it is here. I believe we must keep America Sharia free and stop it from coming here any further.
Frank, I want to thank you very much for your testimony. We're running a little over today, and we will follow up. Okay, next we have some officials from Entergy. They're going to be testifying on Entergy's Indian Point Security and Emergency Preparedness. Fred Giacomo, I hope I have the name right, probably don't.